Welcome to the Dog's Way Podcast, episode 87. This is the fourth installment in our emergency broadcast series. So in today's lesson, we're going to work on the introduction to the place command, and then in tomorrow's episode, we'll work on the progression into doing that same skill with distractions. And for those of you with adult dogs, you can jump into this as well if you don't have that place command nailed down with your dog. I'll be right back.
Welcome to the Dog's Way Podcast, where we solve dog problems by training people. Because, let's face it, your dog couldn't possibly download this podcast on their own. And now your host, here he is, Sean McDaniel.
Thank you, John Melly, for the introduction, and welcome to the Dog's Way Podcast, episode 87. And in today's episode, I've got a little bit of an email bag because there's a couple of questions that are kind of circulating around, and I wanted to address that by responding to a couple of emails that are representative of a bunch of emails that I got in. So we'll do a little email bag, and then we'll jump into our training session. So let's check out our emails from the email bag. Our first email comes in from Sandra from Los Angeles, California. And Sandra writes in, Hi, Sean. I can't tell you how grateful we are for your emergency broadcasts. Everyone in our family is doing a session with Sam every day now. With 3 kids at home, that's a great part of their day. Well, good job. Hopefully they're short sessions, because that's a lot of sessions for a puppy. I'm not sure how old your puppy is, but Sandra continues, and I'm really appreciating your messages about resilience too. I'm a counselor, and you're right. Resilience is the super skill, she has in all caps, that makes all other skills effective. I must have been feeling more emotional than I thought about all this because I never thought a dog training podcast would make me cry. Sorry about that. But your message from yesterday's podcast made me tear up periodically for the rest of the day as I thought about it. Parenthetically, she writes, that's a good thing. And I've started sharing your podcast with a lot of people that I know. Some of them don't even have dogs. That probably doesn't make sense. She writes, I just think you're such a calming voice and we need more of that right now. But to my question, I heard the food puzzle episode and I've heard about a do-it-yourself food puzzle using a cupcake pan and tennis balls. Have you heard of that idea of hiding food underneath the tennis balls? Do you recommend that as a good game? Thanks again, and keep up the good work, Sandra, Los Angeles, California. Well, thanks, Sandra. That's the reason I read that out is I got more of those emails than I thought I was going to get. I think a lot of people are kind of getting hit by this a little bit emotionally and psychologically. And I've got a lot of really nice emails in from people that they're kind of liking the podcast. So that's great to hear because that's why I'm doing them. But to your question, I've heard of that. For those of you that don't know what Sandra's talking about, there's kind of a DIY. You can probably look it up. There's like a dozen different videos on YouTube where you take a cupcake pan and you hide food in, 1 or 2 or 3 of the holes, and you put tennis balls over all of the holes, and your dog has to kind of figure out which one has the food. And if you have those around, by all means, I'd experiment with that. If you have to go out and buy a cupcake pan and you have to buy tennis balls, then you're pretty close to about the price of some of those food dispensing toys because they're not all that expensive. But if you have that stuff around, by all means, try it out. I think what you'll find, Sandra, is that I've experimented with that. I saw that, whatever it was, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I've tried it out with different dogs. And I think it's probably a good personality test too. If your dog is kind of more curious and gentle and shy and maybe more of a small to medium-sized dog, I think that can be a good DIY food puzzle. If you have a larger dog or a little more boisterous dog, a little more of a kind of that bull in a china shop, it doesn't work as well. I remember I was trying this with my German Shepherd that passed away a few months ago. This is like years ago now, but I saw that I think for the first time years ago, and I was like, oh, let's give this a try. And he was pretty young at the time. He was about 2 or 3 years old. And so I set it up, and I put the food in a couple of those things, and I put tennis balls over all of them. And he sniffed at it, looked at me, sniffed at it again, and just put his nose underneath the edge of the cupcake pan and just flipped the whole thing over and ate all the food off the ground. So I guess puzzle solved. That was kind of his solution for it. So maybe it's a good personality test for your dog. You could try it out if you have a cupcake pan and a bunch of tennis balls sitting around. But thanks again for your message, Sandra. I really appreciate that the podcasts are helping you guys out. And good question about the puzzle. There's lots of interesting ways you can kind of DIY some food puzzles for your dog. But let me know if you guys have more creative ideas about how to DIY that stuff. Our second email comes in from the other side of the country, Miami, Florida. And Rosie writes in, "Hi, Sean, these podcasts are incredible. Your descriptions are so clear and organized. I can't believe you're putting out a new episode every day. We're doing a lot of the homework that you're assigning, but I'm wondering if you'd ever consider doing a FaceTime, Zoom, or Skype appointment with me. I'd love to get your feedback in real time about some of the things that are going on with my puppy. I won't give you the long list of issues here, but please let me know if a virtual appointment option is available. Thanks, Rosie, Miami, Florida." The reason I read your email out, Rosie, and obviously I've communicated with you since you sent me the email. But yeah, I've got like a dozen of those exact same questions in. And it's funny because until I started getting them in, I didn't. It's one of those things like that's right in front of you, but you don't really realize it. It's how I was finishing up a lot of the individual in-person lessons that I was doing that we were kind of halfway through when all of these rules came down. And so we kind of finished a lot of the lessons up virtually. For me, it was Skype. And I never actually thought to let you guys in the podcast world know that that was available. I hadn't really set it up formally and didn't make any announcements about it, but just contacted I had a dozen clients that were kind of ongoing at the time that these rules came down, and we kind of finished stuff up that way. But if that's interesting to you guys, or if you want to touch base and do kind of a Skype lesson virtually, send me an email and I'm sure we can set something up. I'm going to touch base with Rosie and we're going to do a couple of little puppy lessons virtually there over Skype, or actually I think Zoom with her. But yeah, if you guys are interested in that, maybe I'll set up some formal times and set up an online calendar that you guys can kind of pick spots if that's something that's of interest to you guys. So if that's of interest, let me know and I'll spend a little more time organizing that stuff. But thanks, Rosie, and I will talk to you tomorrow, I think. So that's our email bag. Let's jump into introducing the place command to your puppy. So in today's puppy skills lesson, I'm going to give you that introduction to place command. Before I do that, though, because there's just a ton of new listeners, and you're kind of listening through these emergency broadcasts and you don't have the background on stuff. So if that describes you, I would definitely go back and check out the earlier podcasts back in like episodes 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are kind of some of the basic foundational stuff that you'll need for this. But I'm going to give you just a quick Cliff's Notes version of a couple of things you need to know to be able to do this lesson and kind of know what you're doing. So 2 things about puppy treat giving, since we're doing a puppy lesson and we're giving treats, and we're actually doing a little bit of operant conditioning today. We want to know a little bit about a verbal marker or a marker of behavior, and then just how to give a puppy a treat. So the reason I use a verbal marker, by the way, I alluded to this 2 podcasts ago, as opposed to, say, a clicker or a whistle or a buzzer, is not because verbal markers are technically better than those things. Artificial signals are actually technically better than verbal markers because they're more unique and more discrete, meaning that if you use a clicker in training, you don't walk around just randomly clicking that all the time and then do a special click when the puppy does something you like. You save that click to make it unique so it can mark a behavior and predict that treat or reinforcer is going to show up. And that artificial signal, like a clicker, is more discrete, meaning there's a really definitive starting and ending to that. However, the thing that verbal markers have that an artificial marker of behavior doesn't have is that with my voice, I bring my voice almost everywhere. So the challenge with that marker of behavior, as elegant and as finessed as it is, it's a great sort of technology to have at your disposal, but you have to have it at your disposal immediately to mark a behavior. You can't mark something 4 seconds later, 6 seconds later, 10 seconds later. That's precisely why you're using a marker of behavior. I'll give you kind of an example. If you were a dolphin trainer and you weren't using markers of behavior, you would have a problem reinforcing behaviors. Because if you had a bucket of fish and you realized, hey, you know what, I'm going to use this fish to reinforce, all reinforce means is makes the behavior more likely to occur, I'm going to give the dolphin a fish every time it does one of those big jumps. And so if you stood at the side of the pool and you had a bucket of fish and the dolphin jumped out of the water just randomly and you went, oh, they did the jump, great. You grab a fish, slap it on the side of the water, the dolphin comes over, you throw a fish into their mouth and you go, hey buddy, nice jump there 8 seconds ago. That was awesome. You think you're giving the fish to reinforce or reward the jump that happened 8 seconds ago, and the dolphin thinks they're getting the fish for coming over to the side of the pool because that's the behavior that happened most closely related in time to the getting of the fish. So markers of behavior, or bridging signals technically is what they're called. They're called bridging signals because it bridges the gap between behavior and reinforcer. If you have primed that marker of behavior, meaning to that dolphin or that puppy, that sound means, hey, a reward's coming, a reinforcer's coming, then you can really specifically mark certain behaviors and then reward them 4 seconds later, 3 seconds later, 6 seconds later, 8 seconds later. So you're using markers of behavior precisely so you can reach into your pocket, grab a treat, and give that dog the treat to reinforce the behavior that happened 8 seconds earlier. Or you can pet your dog. Lots of things can be reinforcers, by the way. It's not just food. It's anything that has primary inherent value for your dog. Could be a treat, could be a toy, could be a game of tug, could be walking through the front door, could be a pet on the head, could be getting out of a crate. So anything that has primary value that you don't have to condition that value to is a reinforcer. In this case today, we're going to use a verbal marker and a piece of food as a reinforcer. So the last little primer thing that I want to give you is how to give a puppy a treat. I know it sounds super basic, but it'll be a super basic thing that you'll really like because puppy teeth are sharp. So if you give a puppy a treat, make sure you make a bowl out of your hand, put that treat in the middle of your hand, and put your hand under the puppy's mouth so they can kind of scoop that out of your hand with their lips and tongue and take that softly, learn to take treats softly. If you hold that treat between your thumb and index finger and hold that over their head, they have to snap at it. They have to take it with their teeth. And if you have a super food motivated puppy, guess what? They're going to probably take a little piece of your finger with it too. So my guess is you probably don't want that. So that's the super quick Cliff's Notes primer on treat giving and bridging signals and markers of behavior. But the only other thing that I want you to know, if you haven't heard it before, if you're brand new to the podcast, I always follow 2 principles in training. The second principle I'll talk to you about today is keeping the freedom-responsibility equation in balance. What I mean by that is I don't want to give more freedom to a puppy than their level of responsibility indicates they ought to have at the time. So what that means really is you have to structure up a puppy's life. If they have a full run of the house and they can just do whatever they want, you're going to have a hard time training your puppy. If you're wondering whether you're violating that freedom-responsibility balance principle, the best barometer I can give you is your frustration level, or how frequently you're yelling no or ah or something like that. If you're constantly frustrated, if you've ever uttered the phrase, whose idea was it to get a puppy? You're probably violating the freedom responsibility balance principle. Solution's pretty simple right out of the gate is literally limit your puppy's space. Structure your puppy's life up a lot more. Some tools to do that. If you don't have a crate, get a crate. If you don't have a puppy pen, get a puppy pen. I'll include some links in the show notes of a couple of things that you might need to get. You can look them up, though. There's lots of reviews on crates and pens for puppies. I'll include some links in the show notes of ones I've used before. But the reason you want to limit this space is so that you can actually have a little bit of a babysitter for a period of time. Because one of the things I alluded to in the last puppy podcast a couple of episodes ago was that puppies don't just learn when you decide that it's a training session. Puppies learn when they're awake all day long. And so if your puppy's out roaming around the house, they're just going to decide everything's a chew toy. They're going to decide to chase anything that moves. And if you are hoping to show them kind of the household rules and policies and teach them how you live life in your house, you're going to have to be at least in a semi-training mode if they're out of that secluded puppy-proofed area. So that seclusion is for your sanity as well. So all that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to be using our puppy pen as kind of our little Skinner box, our little enclosure today. So the setup for this is the puppy's going to be off leash if they're in the pen. If you don't have a pen and you want to try this out, you can try this, but your puppy has to be on a leash and collar, and the space restriction is literally just going to be the length of the leash. It's usually not as good to start that way because you put a leash and collar on a puppy that's maybe not used to it too much, or they think the leash is a chew toy. It's just a distraction in the play, and so it just makes it a bit harder. You add more distractions, tasks get harder. If you keep it simple and have a puppy in a pen, you can even take all the other stuff out, right? You can take their crate out, you can take all the chew toys out, and you just have a puppy and their bed just sitting on the floor inside the pen. And you get a dining room chair, you sit it right next to your puppy pen, and you've got a bag of food, and you're ready to go. So you've really got two modes in this introduction exercise. You've got total oblivious ignoring mode. You're sitting in the chair, and you can sort of situate the chair in a place where your puppy can't quite get to you, right? So 6, 8, 10 inches away from the edge of the puppy pen. Face it sideways to the pen so that you can, if you're sitting on it, you're side facing the puppy, and you're just looking off into the distance. You're not looking at your puppy. You're not talking to the puppy. And ideally, this isn't while, your 5 kids are running around in the same room. You want a nice quiet area to introduce this concept in a low distraction environment. We always want to introduce in a lower distraction environment. So that's your setup. You got your food that's motivating. You got your chair sitting next to the puppy pen. You got the puppy in the pen with just a bed. No chew toys, no crate, no nothing else. And then you just wait around. It's kind of like that dolphin trainer at the side of the pool, right? You're just waiting for that random jump out of the water. In this case, we're waiting for the puppy to contact the bed. So you just wait around. They sniff around, they jump up on the side of the pen, they whine a little bit, they do a couple other things, they hear a noise outside, and they might just randomly walk over to the bed, not intending to go on the bed, but they just randomly have one foot that steps on the bed. You break out of your oblivious act, you go, good, and then you drop a treat right in the middle of that bed. Make sure it stays on the bed. You can place it there so it doesn't bounce off and go somewhere else. And then you just sit back down and ignore your puppy. Watch him out of the corner of your eye, don't talk to him, and wait until another foot hits the bed. When another foot hits the bed, you mark that. The moment the foot touches the bed, say, good. And then stand up, place the treat right in the middle of the bed, sit back down, ignore the puppy. Now, this isn't the behavior we want, right? This is what's called an approximation of the behavior we want. Ideally, we'd like the puppy to go over to the bed when we say bed and lie down on their bed and stay there until we say off. But we're not there yet. We're just starting with an approximation of the behavior, just touching the bed. So they walk over, a foot or two hits the bed. The moment that happens, you say, good, and place the treat right in the middle of the bed. Now, we're placing the treat in the middle of the bed because it's sort of suggesting a little bit. It's kind of implying, hey, I've got to go onto the bed to get that treat. So they start having that association come up as well. They may have to be even more on the bed than that first touch that they did that we're actually rewarding. So about 6, 7 times in a row, any approximation of getting on the bed, you're going to say good as the marker right when it happens, and then lean in and put the treat right in the middle of the bed and let them have that treat and sit back down and ignore the puppy. What you want to see after those first 5, 6, 7 times is you want to start to see those wheels start to turn. If that food's motivating for your puppy, they're going to start to kind of look at you, look around, jump up, do a couple other things, because they don't quite know exactly why the treat's showing up yet. But with a little more precocious puppies, you might start getting that kind of look in their eye like, hang on, wait a minute. And you might see them try out their theory. What if I go over and touch this bed with my paw or with 2 paws, and you say, good, and then you give them a treat? Once you start seeing that happening where they're going, wait a minute, I think it's me that's causing the treat to show up on the bed. It's me that's getting you up out of the chair. If I go over to this thing over here, you get up and you give me a treat. So what I want them to do is get really kind of ingrained with that. Now, you could theoretically just end the session there. Right? Once they just get that little bit of like, hey, I can make you get up and put a treat on this bed by just going over and putting my front 2 paws on the bed. Or if your puppy's still motivated, we can kind of continue through to the second layer of this. So the second layer of this is where you stop rewarding that version or that approximation. So consistent reward 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row until you start to see those wheels turning and see the puppy start to go, I think it's me doing it. Then we're going to stop rewarding that version or that level of approximation of the exercise. So they go over and they put their 1 paw that they've been putting on it or their 2 paws they've been putting on it, and you don't budge. You just watch them out of the corner of your eye, and you don't move. You don't say good. You don't get up, and you don't put the treat in the middle of the bed, and you wait a little bit to see what kind of problem solving they're going to do. If they sort of get it, if the wheels are turning, what they're going to do is do a little more of the behavior. Well, what if I get like even more on the bed? So if you get 3 paws on the bed, then you go, good, and you put the treat in the middle of the bed again. And so we're no longer rewarding the 1 paw or the 2 paws. We're only marking and rewarding or reinforcing the 3 or more paws on the bed. And once you get that happening 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row, 3 or 4 paws on the bed. They're just standing there. You say, good. You put the treat in the middle of the bed and you look at it. You get that second layer happening of maybe all 4 paws on the bed. And then after 4 or 5 or 6 consistent rewards for that level of the behavior, you're going to then stop rewarding that level of approximation and you're going to wait to see what else they do. If they don't quite get it at that point, what you can do is you can reward slightly differently and add a little bit of luring help to this. So they go over there, they try a couple things, they maybe stand on the bed and bark at you. Just ignore them. And then what you're going to do is just change the way you're giving the treat. So now we're into our kind of giving the treat out of your hand kind of thing, because we're going to add in a little bit of a lure here. So if you're up to the stage where all 4 feet are going up on the bed, as soon as those 4 feet get on the bed, you're going to say, good. You're going to mark it right when the 4 feet get on the bed. You're going to lean over, and instead of putting the treat right in the middle of the bed and leaving it there, you're going to put the treat on your puppy's nose and lure them down towards the surface of the bed, kind of like you're luring them into a down, and just hold it there. Just hold your hand right there next to the surface of the bed and just keep your hand closed and let them kind of mess around with your hand a little bit. Most puppies, if they've gone through 8 or 10 or 12 repetitions and they've really been thinking hard at this, they're probably not going to mind lying down with this. So just leave that treat down there, kind of about 2 inches in front of where their toes are. Don't lure them out too much away from their toes. Otherwise, you're going to kind of drag them along. You're going to lure them off the bed. Just keep that treat enclosed in your hand, right on the surface of the bed, couple inches in front of their toes. As soon as they plunk down on the bed, say, good, and open up your hand and reinforce that by letting them have the treat. And then just dole out some treats right in the middle of their front 2 paws, 2 or 3 or 4 treats in a row. And then what you're going to do is you're going to wait for a second and you're going to say, off. And you're going to go over to the other side of the pen and clap your hands, make some noise, and entice them off of the bed. As they come over to you and get off the bed and they're kind of more animated, you can reach in, give them a little treat, make that bowl under their mouth and give them that second treat for kind of responding to the off command, and then go sit down on your chair again and see what happens. Now, a lot of this is literally experimentation, right? Different puppies are going to respond in different ways. Some puppies are going to go, I've got it. I got the formula. You want me to go over to this bed and lie down. Got it. So when they do that, you say, good. And you reach down and you give them that treat out of your hand and you dole out 2 or 3 treats right between their front paws. So they're just in a down, lying down on the bed. And then you say, off. Go to the other side of the pen, clap your hands, make some noise, entice them over, crouch down if you need to, like we were doing in the puppy socialization skills exercise a couple podcasts ago, and give them a treat for getting off the bed and coming over to you. That would be the first introductory session. Now, you can repeat that level of introduction 2 or 3 times in a day. And what you're really doing in your sort of observational part of this training is you're just wanting to see that body language of them kind of thinking about stuff and problem solving, and you want to see how much of this they kind of get. So as a little kind of macro piece of advice here, and sort of what your training sessions look like throughout the day, is it's way better with puppies to do like 5 to 7 minute training sessions and do that a bunch of times throughout the day and work that into kind of your consistent schedule and your housebreaking game plan as well. Your housebreaking game plan has to do with that crate, that puppy pen, and structured schedule and consistent cueing of what you mean. If you want more information on housebreaking, you can go back and check out episode 5, and that covers housebreaking and also has a link to the article in there that's kind of a little cheat sheet, a little primer on housebreaking as well. But think about in that schedule you're developing of just doing little 5, 6, 7 minute sessions. And this is a great one to do because you have them in your pen, you have it really secluded, you have a really minimal setup, and you've only got one thing to do. Walk over to the bed, lie down, and then get off when you say off. Once you have that happening pretty regularly, so the indication of progression for you is just how quickly your puppy gets to the, I got it, jump on the bed. You sit down in your chair and the puppy looks at you and goes, hang on, I know what this setup is. And they just go running over to the bed, boom, plop down, and then look at you like, okay, I'm ready. At that point, if that's, say, our 3rd or 4th session, you say, good. And then you reach down, you give them the treat like you were doing before out of your hand, but we don't dole out those treats like we were doing before. We wait for just a second. And then we give them a second treat and space those treats out while they stay on their bed for, say, 10 whole seconds. Might give them 2 treats, maybe 3 treats, but I'm not going to dole them out consistently right in a row and put them right between their paws. I'm going to have them wait for 2 seconds in between treats, 3 seconds in between treats. Then I'm going to say off, just like you did before. So far you're just repeating kind of how you finished up that first introductory session, if that's the stage you got to. Now what we're going to start to do is we're going to start to label what it is you want them to do. So we're going to add the command. So I say bed, and what you're going to do is you're going to cheat it just a little bit. You've said off, they've gotten off the bed, they come running over to you at the other side of the pen, you give them the little treat, and then you start walking back over to your chair, and you see their little understanding of the rules where they go, hang on a minute, I think I'm going to go right back over to the bed and get another treat from you. When you see that behavior, you see them kind of beelining for the bed, you just add in the command kind of in association with what they're already doing. So they go trotting over to the bed and you say bed, and you just meet them there and you give them a treat. Dole out 2 or 3 treats for that little bit of duration introduction on the bed, and then you say off, go to the other side of the pen, give them their treat. And then what you can do is after 2 or 3 of those repetitions like that, when you're adding the label just as they're doing it anyways, then what you can do is stand up at the other side of the pen, and instead of starting to walk over to your chair, right from standing there, you can point over to the bed and say, bed, and pause for just a second and see what they do. Just stand there where you were at the other side of the pen and see what their understanding of everything is. What you might see is you might see them kind of look at you and wait to see, wait, are you going to give me a treat here? Maybe I should lie down right here. If they start to do all of those things that you don't want, then you just walk back over and finish your part of the dance routine, walk back over to your chair, sit down, and see what they do. That idea gives you an indication of what they understand about the command. Might not mean anything at that point. So just add the command in association with kind of what they're doing already. Go through a couple, 3 sessions of that idea of them going, wait, I know how to get a treat. I'm going to run over to the bed and lie down. Just as they start to go that direction, you say bed, and then meet them over there, give them the treat, 2 or 3 treats for duration on the bed, say off, and bring them over to the other side of the pen, and just keep repeating it like that. You'll know you're ready for the next progression when you can stand at one side of the pen, get their attention, maybe give them a treat or 2, point over to the bed that's, 2.5 or 3 whole feet away on the other side of the pen. You give them the direction, give them the command, bed, and they look at you for a second and then go running over and plop down on the bed. You meet them over there, dole out your treats just like before, say off, give them a treat for abiding by the off command. Now you know you're through this whole introduction of that command. You've got them kind of aware of the behavior you want. You've got that starting to get labeled. You might need 2 or 3 or 4 sessions for them to associate or click in that label with what you want, but that's the whole introduction piece of this. What we're going to do in tomorrow's podcast is I'm going to give you the next layer of that, kind of what I would call a phase 2 of that, where we start adding some distractions. So we're going to add a few of those things in tomorrow's podcast. We're going to introduce the leash and collar being on your puppy inside the pen, and then we're going to take the puppy outside the pen with the leash and collar on, and the bed's going to be outside the pen. In other words, a bigger area, and we're going to work on that in a bigger area with the leash and collar on. We're going to work on just a little bit of direction with the leash and collar if we need to create some limitation as kind of our first step in adding a step up in degree of difficulty. And then we're going to start to add mild distraction to the situation. And then I'll give you a progression in tomorrow's podcast of working your way up to using bigger distractions like a knock at your doorbell sound, or someone walking into the room. So you'll have a bunch of progression homework to do in tomorrow's podcast. For you guys with adult dogs, you can do this same exercise. You just don't need the puppy pen to do it. You can have a leash and collar on your dog. You can do a little more guiding and a little more luring. But the way you would do that, if you want to throw treats into the mix, just to kind of experiment with it, is have your dog on a leash, walk over near their bed. As soon as their paws touch the bed, say good, and put a treat down in the middle of the bed. And just roll through that same exercise, just how I described in the puppy exercise, except you don't need that puppy pen limitation. Your dog's not super distracted by having a leash and collar on, I assume. And you can start to just inculcate that behavior of them kind of going, geez, I don't know why I like going on my bed now, but that seems to be a really cool thing. Now, the thing you can do with an older dog is you can have a little bit more enforcement of this. In other words, if they go on their bed, you give them a pet or a treat for reinforcement, and they go, and I'm done. I'm just going to get off the bed. You can take that leash and collar and just guide them back. A little pull, release, pull, release, pull, release. Just put them right back on their bed and just leave them right there with their forepaws on the bed. If they want to lie down, great. If they don't, that's fine right now too. But you can do a little bit more enforcement with dogs that aren't little puppies, because they can handle that input and kind of make sense of it. We're not doing big corrections for this yet. We're just guiding, and kind of by enforcement, I mean, we're just kind of going, oh no, we're just staying on the bed over there. Guide, release, guide, release, guide, release. Just literally lead them back over to the bed and just leave them with their forepaws on the bed and turn your back on them with the leash in your hand. Drape that leash out. You can be 3 or 4 feet away from your bed and just wait for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then say off. And then let them get off the bed, pet them up, or give them a treat if that's your reinforcement. And that's kind of how you would do it with an older dog, where you don't need the puppy pen. You don't need to do the purely operant conditioning mode for introducing an older dog to this command. And you can have a little more limitation and guidance back and enforcement of that kind of boundary, essentially, of the edge of the bed as well. So there you go. That gives you guys a couple of days of foundational homework. And in tomorrow's episode, I'll give you the progression of that to take you all the way up into pretty heavy-duty distractions while you're sending your dog over to their bed. But in keeping with that mini tradition of leaving you guys with a thought on resilience, I dug up another reference for you guys today. I know I don't want to get too geeky classical on this. I know yesterday's quote was from Horace, who was a first-century lyrical poet in the Roman Empire. So to balance that out, I thought I'd go with a modern lyrical poet of our era named Sylvester Stallone. Really in the character of Rocky Balboa, Rocky has a discussion with his adult son in one of the Rocky iterations, and he gives him a little bit of a life lesson. I'll link to a little YouTube clip of this if you want to watch Sylvester Stallone deliver the lines, because I'm sure he can do it a lot better than I can. In talking to his adult son, Rocky Balboa says, "Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are. It'll beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life, but it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward." There's more to that scene and more to that speech, but I'll let you guys watch that on the YouTube video and let Sly Stallone deliver that in only the way he can in the person of Rocky Balboa. But I selected that for today's little thought on resilience, I suppose, because many of us have been hit pretty hard in the last few weeks. This is the largest scale extended national and international response we've had to deal with since World War II. Now, no disrespect to the greatest generation. I think the sacrifices that you guys made during World War II were far greater than the sacrifices that most of us are being asked to make right now. But in most of our lifetimes, we haven't ever experienced a local, national, or international event like this. 9/11 was a pretty hard hit for the United States, but it wasn't as sustained and long-term as this is. So I guess the question for all of us is, to harken back to the Sly Stallone sentiment, can we take this hit? Can we take this hit and keep moving forward? I think you can. I think we can. And not only that, but I think we're going to be better coming out of this on the other side of this challenge. Okay, there you go. Hopefully that gives you guys a fun introductory session for your puppies. Let me know how it goes and check in with questions. Keep moving forward. Go have some fun with your dog. I'll talk to you next time.